instead of a firecracker noise, like a hybrid of that would be imitating someone's vocal cords, given that at any odd moment. I just thought in a movie, if it was scary, you'd see a garage door going up, you'd see red liquid under it, kind of envelope as it goes up. And the more red liquid it would be, the scarier it is. And that's how volume is an expansion of reality. Let's take a minute to bash the Homeland Security. I'm gonna get a round of applause, please. Homeland Security. Bang up job, boys. How about doing nothing and being as silent as a mute button? So clearly, you've got this guy talking about the water cycle and the expansion of what joules are in friction when it's lost. I think that's the fine graining remediation whenever you're handling the road properly. Your tires build up a certain press on them that is impressive when you have great handles, but it's the fine tuning of friction. And so energy is never lost, but however, unlike the joule friction levels and then the heat expansion and contraction, that energy can be lost. But on the minute scales, how much wind is whipping up about that versus cars, a diesel engine that's roaring, versus these other ones that aren't that bad that I have to talk over. So in this, the scale stepping, if you're trying to guess what these were made up of and you're only allowed the bottom step, run up to the top step, you get a clearer picture, but it's the same type of dystrophy that is lost. Calculus is Riemann sons, and that's what's backed up mathematics, is the large stuff like electromagnetism on the fine scales. So with heavy traffic is an ongoing of wind. If I know anything about engines, is that they combust. One time, in driving in a really odd area, it was over a bridge, and I think it hit an air pocket where it sounded as though inside of the engine in the front, where all the wind is received, heard a giant pop like a firecracker. Now this phenomenon has happened twice, probably 3 times. The third is the most weird, so we'll start with that first. Inside of a rec room in New Hampshire, in Camp Cody, there was another pop from the ceiling. This was done by calling out a name, Johnny Johnny. This kid had died from firecrackers thrown into a stable as the horse kicked his head. And we heard firecrackers up in the ceiling, but there was no flashing. The second time, the crack of a firecracker surfaced again in flipping a trash bag so fantastically that it made a whip crack. But it made an actual sound as loud as 8 firecrackers spontaneously combusting at the same time. The firecrackers of air pockets. If all together you're trying to make the same of a flow of traffic from the slowest point to the most sped up point, where all the diesels are together, that would be the loudest roar of the most wind. How many air pocket cracks can you make in between those, given that they're definite logistics? Given that, they can make snake venom in labs that is not from a snake, and they can make women's breast milk in labs that are not from a woman. So in a long term, when the cells are breaking down, and either for a benefit or a thing that could hurt someone, like a snake venom, it's gonna fall short each time because its basis isn't a legitimacy. And so that's how important trees are with fungus on it, how they can dial up and communicate with each other across the land as like a natural Wi-Fi is that much more impressive than water towers that have a whole bunch of high rate voltages on top of them with 5G panels. Spark plug. And people are not plants or individuals, but the more that they're treated as like a product of agriculture by, feeding them and putting like adjuvant inside of products that are used for body care, is going to be the same as though like someone's a firecracker. When someone gets so angry and they're saying, "Oh, my blood is boiling," well, that's the literal temperature gauge that they've gone up at. Or when someone has a split reaction and they go off like a spark plug, that's another thing that's actual. Even though they're not a material, they can resemble it twice as well. My solution for handling this is how jewels are handled. If you have a whole bunch of paper and they're aligned with their edges all aligned, it's going to be easier to rip it, as opposed to if they're all pattywonkus and in a chaotic scramble of paper and you try ripping it, it'll be a bit harder because the grains will be more randomized. As well as pressure with holding a whole bunch of papers. If you have more papers and you're pressing down on water as opposed to less papers pressing down on water, it's going to be easier to handle and less pressure will be needed to apply to the wetness, having more paper on top of each other while pressing on top of wetness. So I have load data, so I'm going to say this really quickly because my phone's glitching and I think it's going to just break. So if I don't say it really quickly, it's not going to get through. If you're being conditioned to fit a product that isn't a real material, like toxins inside of body, deodorant is like when you get something put on you like a necklace and then you forget it's there because it feels like it's part of your body. Is your body being conditioned to whatever your necklace, if it's real gold or fake gold, then you'll probably be fake for choosing to wear it, and then you'll feel like fake when you are wearing it and you become accustomed to it. So if you were a designer and you had these touch-proof gloves that had touchpad sensors on it, and you put the touching sensors of the pads on the hands, what are they called? Touch sensitive, touch screen, fingertips. Bro, I gotta jump over it. If you have a word processor, this is a thing where you type in with keys in order to make an output of a robotic voice making sounds of English. Choosing the languages is the word processing part. Entering in with the keyboard, it reads a binary input. These are like little dots being zeros and ones. The same phenomenon can be done with a music box, and this is done usually through like vibrations of metal if it is a wind-up crank, or can be done with a flute. If you've got a flute that's set in a certain curvature, you can blow in it, and the amount of wind pressure, if it's hit right enough, will make the certain sound scripting of whatever the presets are casted as. Those two phenomenon, when including the entire Earth, has a natural process of momentum and heat. And when energy is always conserved, you're gonna have yourself a cast mold of an ongoing flute / music box of the wind or the vibration of fault lines with whatever sinkholes are near. This is impressive because it also registers as oxidation of anything, being that electromagnetic frequencies are ran about a natural environment. That's how pigeons actually read the North Pole and are able to migrate.